family out here. Sister Marion said that she found the PD or bought one or got one, was able to get one. So, we'll be coming from this today. If you're on YouTube, this is the book once again. And so it's still available. It's a great book. Um, even if they don't have exactly our belief system, like I said, we should always study as many things as we possibly can. So if you're able to see this, but this is kind of where we're based off from today. So, and kind of basing this really like kind of from page 203 to like, maybe the next few pages, I guess to the end of the chapter. This is like the end of chapter 10. So it goes from like page 203 in chapter 10. We kind of base most of this off of this chart going on over to this chart over here. I don't know if you guys want to take a screenshot. Um, I don't know if you can. If you can read it, if you want to take a screenshot real quick, I'll leave this up for about 10 seconds. And then I'll do the same on YouTube, just so you all to try to able to get a picture of this. And these live sessions on Saturdays go a little shorter than the other ones do, simply because we have our podcast coming up, the service, if you will, Shabbat Shalom podcast on the Kofi 40 podcast. Um, so if you'd like to be able to roll with us on that, but if you want to take a screenshot of this, maybe possibly if I have time, I can try and put this in the description box or something with the video, or maybe we can have somebody else write it out for us since we have some help. But we're coming from this today. I'm glad you asked, and we're looking at something that really stems from this. So once again, if you want to try and take a screenshot real quick, I'm not going to leave it up that long. But we have it on YouTube, I believe YouTube right now, before we get to the 2 minutes. So once we get to about the minute 45 section on YouTube, if you want to go back and look at the recording of this on the YouTube channel and just, look on there, see if you can take a screenshot and see if you can go back and read it. I'm trying to get it as close as possible, but I'm not sure how easy it will or will not be able to read. However, we thank you guys. How you doing, Defender? Everybody who's on today. Give me a second. I'm sorry. Go through a little roll call. Well, I guess I'm waiting for this device to pop up. But we're excited. Don't forget to come on the Shabbat Shalom service on the podcast. It'll be at 10 a.m. Eastern New York time. My wife will be on, and Sister Ro, her mother, will be on to continue the conversation that was started last weekend. And feel free to call in and stuff as well. We'll try to make sure that we leave some time for people to call in and everything as well. So thank you for that. Brother Coleman, how you doing? Grand Rising. Sister Barbara, how you doing? Key Troy, I think I had already said hello to the first couple, but Key Troy, Anthony, Benjamin, Minister Tamara, True Origin, what's up again, Defender, Sister Bree, everybody who's coming on. Been thankful to have you guys on with us today. Prayerfully your day is going well and you're relaxing, you're chilling. Hopefully you get a chance to, get 10 toes in the soil and the earth, and to be able to get out in the sun, and to be able to, be thankful unto him who created all of this great natural law, this nature around us. How you doing, Sister Sharice? How you doing, Pearl? Once again, those who are taking classes, we haven't, if you need the form, we sent out the form to as many people as we could. There are some people who filled out the form but didn't put their name, their number, an email, anything. So some people who said they want to take certain courses, I can't send anything to you because I don't have any information to send you to or send it to you. So please, ma'am, please, sir, if you have the link and you didn't get an email as of yet, we sent out Google Calendar invites to everybody that we had your info. So if for some reason you didn't get anything back, please fill out the form again, or please just contact us. Classes are coming up soon. Even if your answer is maybe you're taking classes, like the maybes, and we can at least contact you to see what the maybe means, and maybe we can help you to make a decision as to whether something's beneficial to you or not. But just wanted to put that out there that we have tried to look up everybody's info, make sure everybody got something from us. We're trying to make sure that we do things in a well executed fashion, in a much better fashion, in all honesty, than what I've been doing in the past. And we have a great system set up to be able to make sure that we can get everybody together for class and stuff, even when it comes to the recordings. Now that we have the Google calendar invites and everything, we can actually even make sure that recordings of the videos and everything that are done in the classes, we can make sure it's done through the same system we have. But if we don't have your information, we can't really give you what you might want from us. So just please, ma'am, please, sir, if you're able to, please let us know. If you're taking classes or whatever, just fill out the forms for us. But please make sure that you put something. If you're not going to put your name, at least put your phone number, put your email, something so that somebody can contact you. And if you want to take classes and things of that nature, we can ensure that we get back to you. Today, we're going to talk about, well, I'm sorry. Let's make sure that we get this stuff together first. Of course, my technology doesn't want to work. That's all right. We're still going to get this stuff out. And also, too, we have the information on the website. So if you are somebody who, for whatever reason, is not able to get the information, or if it's somebody it's hard to find, whatever, we have our link tree. If you're on TikTok, just go to our link tree. I'm going to try to start making sure that as of tomorrow, if not, I don't come back on this video today and do so, that our link tree is on every video now. And also we'll start trying to put it on the podcast as well, in the description on YouTube, in the description on Facebook, in the description. And then we'll also make sure that we start putting it, but we have it on TikTok. If you're on TikTok, all you got to do is go to our main page where it says website, click on website. That's our link tree. And my wife has a whole bunch of places you can go to be able to find out more information about us. Our bio has some information, the link tree doesn't. However, like if you go to the link tree, you can click on whatever and it'll give you what you need, including classes. So if you click on the link tree, it'll say second semester 2022. Click on that. It'll show you the curriculum for all the classes, the days, the times, all those things. And it'll also, if you want to fill out the form, you can fill out the form. Okay. All right. So just letting that be known, making sure that people know that. So let's go ahead and get into this. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight. He is our strength and our redeemer, and it is in his name, which is his authority, that we pray, praise, proclaim, project, and protect this message. Amen. Amen. And once again, too, those of you who are in the Central North region, we're going to be in Chi-Town on the 27th and 28th. We're going to be in Detroit the 29th and 30th. Detroit, we're going to be getting there late in the night, though, so I'm not sure how that'll work. If you still want to come out and say hello to us once we arrive, that should be all right. But the 30th is when we'll be focusing in on making sure that in Detroit, the 30th is when we'll be making sure that we meet up at a park over there and have a great time with one another. All right. So if you want information on that stuff, let us know. Most of you who are in the area that we're aware of, we've already reached out to you to let you know. And so we look forward to trying to meet everyone as soon as possible in those areas. And once again, we give all praise and honor to the Most High. Yahweh Elohim. You said the Most High doesn't love you. Well, Most High has love for everybody, right? But as far as what we're doing, but I'm not sure how that goes. But you can ask some questions or whatever. Hopefully you stick around. Maybe you even want to go to YouTube and see some of the stuff we're talking about after we do this as a series. So this is part 5. Today we're going to focus on hypocrisy. And we're thankful once again to the Most High. We're thankful to the Most High for my wife, the Honorable Maya, who lives a life that's able to be honored. Once again, she'll be on the podcast today with her mother to discuss some of the natural medicine and things like that we've been talking about. So we're going to talk about those things today. We're thankful and grateful to Marsha, Malcolm, Betty, Isabel, and Solomon. Daddy loves you very much. Also, too, as far as my wife, you can check her out. She's a healer, herbalist, chemist, and biologist by degree. And you can check her out at Bloom and Flourish, not A-N-D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. You can find her on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest. If you want to email her, add a number 1 to that. Bloom and Flourish, the number 1 at gmail.com. To the moderators, to the ministerial staff, to those who are watching us for the first time, if your first time of many, etc., thank you for being on. We're in our frequently asked questions series. This is part 5. We have recorded all of these, so you can go to YouTube to be able to check these out. And we're thankful and grateful to each and every person who is on today. And so we are excited and grateful and thankful for you all. So this is frequently asked questions as far as faith is concerned. Of course, people can ask whatever questions and we try to put it in. We just ask that people at least use the standard to be able to critique or whatever it is that you're going to do. And that really kind of brings us to the material for today and what we're talking about. And hello to WHCK and to UCME. Thank you for being on. So today, and hello T, how you doing? Today we want to talk about hypocrites, right? And once again, the book that we're using to kind of focus on this is this one right here, Frequently Asked Questions. Are we Christian? No. Do we believe in everything that they say in here? No. Do we use the names in here, which we'll talk about a little bit today too, that they use? No. However, these are questions that are asked across our diaspora as well. They're questions that should be asked. Anything that's here should be questioned, and therefore, we should go ahead and ensure that we are, in fact, we should make sure that we are, in fact, on track as far as certain things are concerned. So, with these questions, all right, we should question everything to see it's of Elohim. A lot of us say it like this: try the spirit by the spirit, or test every spirit by the spirit, right? Where, well, the Bible tells us that we should try everything by what Elohim's standard is. So today, let's go ahead and get into that. And the first thing we have to talk about, if we're going to talk about hypocrite or a hypocrite, that we have to first comprehend and break down this word hypocrite. Because part of the problem is that a lot of these questions we're dealing with, and a lot of the people that are coming to us with these questions are coming from a place where there lacks crite. It's hypocrite. So hypo means to be underneath or to be beneath. Hypo is beneath. Hyper is like if somebody's hyper, they're up, right? If you're hyper, you're up, right? If you're hypo, you're beneath. All right. So if somebody has hyperglycemia, it means their levels are too high. If they're hypoglycemic, their levels are too low, right? So if we have hyper criteria, you live above a standard, right? If you're uh, if you're hypo criteria or hypocrite, right, then you would live underneath the standard. Okay. So we got to focus first on the end of the word, because hypo is pretty simple. It's beneath. And how you doing? Thanks for being part of the community, Sister Christine. And I missed somebody else earlier. I apologize. Thanks for being on today. And I think it's Reggae Tink. So we have to recognize that a lot of us are living what? Hypo, underneath. But what is it we're living underneath is the question. Because what is the criteria? What is the crite? If somebody's going to critique me, then what is the standard they critique me by? I'm okay with people critiquing me, but critique me by the standard I live by. At least do that first. And we don't have a standard. See, the criteria is one of the biggest issues that we have. Not what even though, yes, color of skin, racism, cynicism, schisms, you know, truism, altruism, all these different isms are systems that are problems. Sure, feminism, sexism, whatever, right? All these things are issues, but the problem with all these systems is that, or all these people who are fighting in these systems, or fighting for, or fighting against, whatever, is that we don't have a criteria we bring up. Something that I noticed early this rising, I was listening to a pastor who's in West Africa, and who I talk to from time to time, and I noticed his dress, and I noticed my dress. So I'm watching his presentation, while and looking at him, and saying to myself, why is somebody who's related to my people, my tribe, why do you dress that way when you live where the standard is something different? But then I realized, well, it's mixed up, because a lot of people believe that dressing like yours, with Eurocentric, where it looks like you carry Eurocentric values, it makes you better. So because he's a pastor, he believes that he should dress like a pastor. Well, to dress like a pastor means he needs to have a suit and tie, because the suit and tie has become the criteria for pastoring. Well, I look over on the other side of the diaspora, and we do the same. We do the same thing, except for every once in a while, to try and get people to say, "Oh, okay, we're with the people." Then you'll see a pastor throw on a dashiki or something, or at least a dashiki print, or some kind of tunic, and then all of a sudden now, oh, okay, he's down with with our people. Um, that's a whack criteria. You see what I'm saying? So if your criteria is, oh, okay, put on a suit and tie, you look like a pastor. See, I don't get as many people that say to me now what they used to, because I used to do the three-piece suit. And, I used to do and have the lifestyle now, just don't make the figures, but, used to make six figures and stuff, and had a lifestyle. And, my wife and I were, living extremely comfortably, still do, right? But, living extremely comfortably, and, living in Northwest DC, and a high area, as far as, people around us, everybody had money and blah, blah. We were still kind of low, but, like we were able to be around it and stuff like that. And people would, and you go to a church service, you go here, you go there. How you doing, Carrie Brown? Thanks for being part of the community. And you go here and you go there and all that stuff. And then you realize people will be saying stuff like, "Oh, you look like a pastor," and you start thinking to yourself, "Why do I look like one?" And then you'd be like, "Oh, I guess because I got the suit and tie on." But the reality is, I'm a better pastor now. I'm a better servant of the Most High now. I'm a better servant of my people. I'm actually, we make sure we travel to different people. We make sure we put money in people's hands if we have it. We make sure that we feed people in other countries. We make sure that our diaspora is taken care of. We are full activists and all these things. And we were doing a lot of that stuff then, but we weren't really known. But we were doing stuff like that. But now all of a sudden, because I'm wearing something different that is more cultural, that is more who I am, and I am accepting who I am. Now all of a sudden I don't look like a pastor anymore. I don't really get that from people. People like my look, but they don't assume pastor. And by the way, that's great because you shouldn't assume somebody's a pastor just because they look a certain way. But I'm trying to get you to comprehend and to see, right, that like this looks like a pastor thing, it don't really jive. This whole looks like a pastor thing, it don't really, right? It don't really jive. It don't really make sense. But that's the criteria. What do you look like? Now we'll say who you are. And so we'll base our, whether you're hyper, living above the criteria, whether you're just a criteria, crites, you just live at the criteria, or whether you're hypo, right? You look at the criteria, or you live underneath it. We base it off of what do you look, right? We'll base it off of what do you look like. Even when somebody says something about KFC, right? That's the person who just made that comment who got muted and is going to be blocked soon. Um, that person legit just made a statement talking about where do you get your KFC fixing from. I didn't even realize what they were saying until I thought about it a few seconds. This person literally just came on and said, "Hey, you're black. You must be looking for fried chicken." Think about that criteria. Criteria can be a dangerous thing, right? You see what I'm saying? A criteria can be a dangerous thing if you don't know what criteria is. Lack of criteria. See, he didn't even have a criteria for humanity. His criteria is you're black, I'm going to say something racist. That's his criteria. You're black, I'm going to say something racist. Right? So he might be, so by his criteria, he might be a hypocrite. Because there's a lot of people who say things about me behind my back, but won't say it to my face, right? And he won't say it to my face either. I guess you can say he's a hypocrite, right? He won't call me up. He won't come see about me. He won't do that to my face, but he'll type it up. So we have to realize and recognize. How you doing, Maggie? We have to realize and recognize, you know, that the criteria is messed up when we're talking about these frequently asked questions. So when we talk about hypocrisy, we're talking about hypo criteria. We're talking about somebody who is living underneath a standard, right? We are living underneath a standard. And so most of the questions and most things we're dealing with are dealing with a standard we live underneath. We're living underneath a standard, but trying to figure out how to live up to the greatest standard for all. And thanks for being part of the community, Gail Head. Like we're living underneath a standard. Okay, so here's something. We're going to go into murky waters, but it is what it is. And some people are not going to like what we have to say today. And we've already seen that when we go into frequently asked questions because we're dealing with a lot of stuff that's going to be emotional, right? Yeah, I see. Yeah, I agree with that. It was executive, right? Or executor, excuse me, right? Like when we talk about these things and we don't want to deal with standards, we have an issue, right? If I don't give you a standard, then how do you know if you're above it or underneath? And there is no standard, right? When you pledge allegiance to that flag, that's a standard. You don't know a flag is a standard, but that's what it is. You're pledging allegiance to a standard. So you need to check to see if you like the standard of what you're pledging allegiance to or not. We have a problem with hypocrisy, with hypocrites, right? Because we don't have a standard set. How can you say, see, people keep saying, look, I'm not saying that we should give people a pass to do some of the foul stuff that they're doing as pastors, right? But if you don't have a standard for your pastor, then how do you hold them to a standard? What is the standard for your pastor? Where do you get it from? Why is the standard for your pastor what school they went to? Well, we need them to be educated. Educated by who? Now, if you want to check their education, I want to know who taught them the Bible. I want to know, I want to talk to the person who ordained them. I want to talk to the person who licensed them. Why are we talking about what school did you go to that's not even going to teach them their standard? See, hypocrite. We're living underneath a standard, asking somebody to lead us underneath a standard. And just as the blind will lead the blind, the hypocrite will lead the hypocrite. And the problem is that you have a blind hypocrite, because if you're ignorant of the criteria, then you don't even know that you're a hypocrite. You don't even know that you live underneath a standard. We don't even know that we live underneath a standard. And how you doing, Sister Asha? How you doing there, Dawn? Coming on at the same time. I'm up. Right? Like, you have to recognize that when you start talking about truth, that's why people get upset, because truth will deal with your standard. It will deal with your criteria. And in order for you to have a criteria, it must be critiqued. You must have critical thought. My standard means that I have to be able to critique it. That's why even the Most High says, everything I tell you, try it out by the way that I say it is, to see if it actually is of value. You said it's a sin to keep secrets? I've never heard that before. Right? I mean, there's levels to it. And like, if you lying about something, lying is different than keeping secrets, I'd say. Or, you can keep secrets by lying, but that's something else. Maybe we can dive into that in a second. Right? But the criteria is what? Is truth. Thank you, Empress. The criteria is what? Is truth. The criteria is what? It is truth. And people don't want to deal with the criteria. We live underneath the criteria. So this is when we start having issues. So somebody says, why do you guys, and we get this question a lot, why do you guys have such a problem with the name Jesus? Now, I believe it to be problematic. It's not something that like reigns supreme over my day, because I don't really deal with it, right? I'm in a different, I'm in the system, but I'm not of it at all, right? Like, even when we do these lives, we don't do them from the places that you would think that everybody has to do the lives from. Like, we do it outside the system, um, even though there's shadow banned and all that, but nevertheless, right? We might use TikTok, YouTube, or whatever, but even the physical location usually is going to be something that's not system oriented. I'm not doing this from a 9 to 5. I'm not doing this from, I got to do this in one room in the house. I'm not doing like so. But when we talk about critiquing, right? Oh yeah, well, 28 USC 3002 15A, is that where we're going? Or are we just talking about 3002 in general, right? That's why we mention that often on the lines. But we're having it, and I'm sorry, I didn't say that to everybody. Thank you for saying that, Clinton. Shabbat shalom to everybody. Excuse me. Uh, and Mr. Southern chimed to you as well. Shabbat shalom. I apologize. But yeah, so we're dealing with this problem with criteria. So here's a big one, criteria-wise. People say, why do you have this issue with Jesus? The name Jesus. Why do you have an issue with this name Jesus? If you look at the criteria, if we're just honest about the etymology, then you can't say that you believe in the Most High and at the same time believe in Jesus. This is right. Now, I've said this before over and over again, but we're going to say it in a little different way. And this is going to be set up for you to do your own homework, for you to do your own research, especially because we have a shorter time than we normally would have, because of the because of the podcast is going to be coming up at 10. So, um, but people don't want to have an honest conversation about this. But you can't be about the Most High and be about Jesus simultaneously. Jesus, Jesus, Yesus, Yesu, Isus, Isa. The two don't go together. Now somebody says, well, wait a minute. So are you saying you don't believe in the Most High have a son? Yeah, his name is Yashua. Well, we just call him Jesus. What's the problem? See, we don't have a criteria. So criteria, when you lack criteria, you can do whatever you want. When you lack criteria. But see, if I'm going to speak a language, then there's a criteria for every language. Hear me now. If I'm going to speak English, there's a criteria that makes it English. And if I'm going to speak en français, there's a criteria that makes it le français. If I'm going to speak Spanish, there's a criteria that makes it espagnol. If I'm going to speak, some African languages, there's a criteria that makes it Kiswahili. There's a criteria that makes it Lingala. There's a criteria that makes it Kemetic. There's a criteria that makes it Kush. There's a criteria that makes it yesterday or Avda, right? Avda is different than modern Hebrew, right? Avda is different than Hebrew. Like there's a criteria for all those things, right? So if I'm going to say the name Jesus, and I know it's a Greek name, and I know before the letter J existed, they spelled it the way that we should actually spell it if we're going to be real about it. Yesus and Yesu. Well, then sus, S-U-S, is not only used in the name Jesus. Now, I'm gonna make sure I'm gonna make sure that I type this up or research this, but I'm sure about some of the names I'm already going to use. But let's just be honest. And once again, criteria. That's what we're talking about today. Hypocrites. When people say, how do we deal with these hypocrites? Why is there so much hypocritical stuff? Why do people say one thing and do another? Right? As if just because somebody does something wrong within the criteria, means that the whole criteria is messed up. That's a whole other thing, right? But let's deal with this, right? The criteria, right? And this name Jesus, right? So we're just going to look up Greek God names and their meaning. Right, we're going to look them up, and we're just going to see their names and what they mean. Right? And I don't know if we're even going to be able to touch all the ones that I want to look at. I might have to go to the Roman ones too. Yeah, the ones I'm looking for, they don't. Yeah, okay. They're going to be very slick on this. Well, actually, okay. Okay. But see, I'm going to give you a couple. And some of these aren't even gods. Well, I guess they would call them gods. Yeah. But let's look at these things, right? And let's see. So, like, for example, let's go. Actually, I might have to go Roman. I'm sorry. I said Greek. That might be the problem. That might be the problem. I think I went Roman instead of Greek. Excuse me. I said Greek. Yeah, they still trying. Okay. So peep game. So when you see Zus at the end, right? When you see sus, right, at the end of a name, you got to start saying to yourself, like, how people say sus and all this stuff, but when you see sus, you should be suspect, right? Somebody say that's sus, that's suspect. How you doing, brother Cole? When you say something's like, oh, that's sus, bro, that's sus, that's sus, that's sus. How you doing, Mike? That's sus, bro. That's sus. That's sus. Yeah. Whenever you see sus on the title, matter of fact, I'm gonna be obedient. Holy Spirit said we don't have to go deep. I'll just give you a couple examples, right? Okay. So people don't think about this, but the name Zeus, Zeus, right? We got to be obedient to the time. Sorry. Let me get myself together. So the name Zeus. Who is Zeus? Right? Who is Zeus? Zeus. Just by itself, the end. Who is that? Who is that? Who is Zeus? Zeus. Right? It's always going to be that person who had the lightning bolt. Right? That's who it's going to be. Right? The Greek god. He ain't really the daddy of them all, but he's supposed to be basically the most powerful one who locked up all the other gods or whatever. Right? That's who he's supposed to be. That's who he's supposed to be. Right? So Zeus. Zeus. Okay. So we're dealing with Zeus. Zeus. that we're talking about him. So this is just something I'm gonna allow you to research. I was gonna go through this deep thing, but I got to be obedient. Holy Spirit told me already we weren't gonna go real deep in there, right? Exactly, right? So Jesus, Jesus, then his part of that name is what? Jesus, 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 Jesus. Part of that name is Zeus already. Do you see a problem there? You can't say you're about the Most High and say you're about Jesus, Jesus, Jesus simultaneously, because the Most High and Zeus don't go together. Now, some people would go, depending on who you talk to, Jesus, the yeah, or who you call he now is either talking about man, so it would be half man, half Zeus, or the yeah part. Some people will even say talks about hail Zeus. So why? So how can you hail Zeus and at the same time lift up Yahweh? We got a problem right from the jump. Right, we have to recognize that we got a problem. Like, and here's something for you to research a little deeper. This is what I was talking about. I'm not gonna go through all the gods and goddesses and stuff, but do a little deeper digging. When I say this, look up all these gods with the title Zeus behind it, and you will discover that it's something of Zeus. For example, just one example, you do the research for yourself. We don't have time. I could, because I'm gonna end up going down a rabbit hole. You can tell I really want to go down there, but I'm gonna be obedient. Okay, look up Pegasus. Oh, somebody already said that. There you go. Right. Look up Pegasus. That is the horse of Zeus. So if we know that Pegasus, it means it's the horse of Zeus. Why would somebody try to get me to believe that Jesus or Jesus is not the something of Zeus? You see the criteria? You see the problem with the criteria? Right. If we'll recognize for Pegasus that the horse is connected to Zeus, then how in the world do you say Jesus or Jesus is not connected to Zeus either? That's why you need to know his name, Yashua, because now it gives you a proper thing. It says sounds like a Pokemon name. I mean, probably. I don't know. I can't remember all the names, but it's kind of how they put. But Pegasus is the horse of Zeus. Go look up other names. You'll find things like the daughter of Zeus and all these different names. Go look it up for yourself. But what I'm trying to tell you is if you know what that name means, then how come when we get to Jesus, somebody says, oh no, that's not that's not what that means. It's actually just the way you say it in Latin, Latin or in Greek. No, it's not. Criteria changes the standard. So one of the reasons why we have a lot of this stuff when people ask about hypocritical stuff, we have to recognize it because a lot of people are ignorant. But whether it's ignorance or not, we got to still admit it. Thank you, Minister Tamara. We got to still admit that, hey, we still got to admit, hey, this is what it is. Like, it's not correct. Something ain't right. Something ain't, the math ain't adding up. The math ain't mathing. Do the maths, right? Something's not right. Something's not where it needs to be. Thank you, Empress. Something's not what it needs to be. If we know that it's this for one thing, and this is their language, and this is how they approach everything, why do you get to Jesus and you say something different? It's because that you don't have a criteria. Your criteria is not founded on fact. And therefore, since you have no criteria or you're using a bad criteria, you are a hypocrite. That's what a hypocrite is. It's somebody who lives underneath the criteria. This is why Yashrai spoke, and thank you, Ransom. He spoke to the religious leaders at the time. And what did he call them? He said hypocrites, people who live underneath the standard. And when you said you don't see a friend request, it says that we're friends on my thing, so I don't know. But I'll look it up some more, right? So Yashvai, some people want to go over Yeshua, some people want to go off of Yahushai, etc. Right? We go Yashvai because of the actual Hebrew characters, Yad, He, Shin, Vav, Ayin, right? But you know, and we can talk about that some more. I'm not talking about the name focus for today, even though that's a question that we're going to get to in this series at some point. However, like the criteria is messed up when you don't know that you're using something that's speaking to Zeus. You can't say that I'm all the way in on the Most High, and at the same time I'm with Zeus. It's got to be one or the other. You'll either love one and hate the other. And so if you won't let go of Zeus, how in the world can you say you love the Most High? If you won't let go of the Most High, then how in the world can we say we love Zeus? It's cognitive dissonance, double-minded. Be ye not double-minded. And when you read that, everybody always goes, what is that? James chapter 1, verse 5, or verse 8, rather, right? We go there first. Be ye not, that we need to make sure we're not double-minded, right? Or because a double-minded man or woman is unstable in all their ways. But peep game, go back to verse 5 and read it again. And it's talking about that if you're trying to pray and you're double-minded, your prayers aren't going any higher than the ceiling. So you out here praying and trying to figure out why stuff isn't happening. Could it be that you still are more into Zeus than you are into the person you're praying to? Could it be a possibility? Right? Could it be a possibility that you've heard some things your whole life and nobody ever came to do what? To give correction and rebuke and reproof, exhortation, endure sound doctrine. This is in your scripture. This is in your book, right? So when we talk about these things, we got to be honest and say, man, there's some things that we're missing, right? Well, if you're talking about why replace, first of all, Jehovah, the letter J once again didn't exist. So you're talking about somebody's culture coming taking on, but Jehovah is not that far off if you look at it from Yahweh. Right? But a lot of people do that. If you take over somebody, a lot of people, they take over you. They put their people in position. They tell you their deities. They tell you their gods, etc. They tell you your netures, their netures, their spirits, whatever. And then you got to deal with it. Their succubus, their incubus, all these things, and you're supposed to put it in. That's why people say God. That's why people say firmament. That's why people say Jesus. Those are three gods right there. Right. That's why people, will speak in certain terms. No, because in Hebrew, in basic Hebrew, or in Hebrew language, especially ancient Hebrew language, modern Hebrew is not really Hebrew. It's a mixture of 3 to 4 different languages. I kind of side on the side of 4, but regardless, like it's a mix of 3, 4 different languages. If you look at Hebrew characters, you don't even have a sound technically. Like we say some of that just to make sure people comprehend what we're saying because people have learned so many different things. But really, in 22 characters, you only have an S sound behind 2 characters, either behind He, which is the 8th character, or Te, which is the 9th character. Other than that, everything's Ah, or you have one that's I, right? And because you have a Pra sound, you can say there's kind of a different one-on-one the characters, but it's going to be Ah, Ba, Ga, Da, Cha, Va, Za, He, Te, then back to Ya, Ka, La, Ma, Na, Sa, the list goes on, right? Everything's going to be a Ah. So there is no Yeh, Ho, Va, and be Ya, Ha, Va. We don't have the O or E. So, but that's criteria based, and we have classes for that, and we talk about that from time to time on here. That's not what my focus is today, but that's a lot of people don't recognize that, right? Okay, executive. I don't know if I was talking to you about what you specifically saying. Somebody else was asking a question. Um, he said Docs and Isaiah wouldn't me. Oh, okay, yeah. I mean, yeah, you pray it. Yeah, I mean, if you pray in His name and you're ignorant of something at the time, Yah's not going to hold that against you. What I'm saying though is that if you yeah, it's like so we had to, so yeah, we can go through the name. So even in the criteria, so then people say, well, is it hypocritical because we prayed in Jesus' name and this person was healed? Well, like if you're ignorant of something, like I don't know, like talking about children, right? You want to be His child, right? If my son prays and says, God, I hope, blah blah blah, my youngest, Solomon, right? He says, God, I hope, da da da. I don't hold that against him. If my 21-year-old says, God, we might look at each other a little funny. You know what I'm saying? It was like, you know, and it does something different, right? So when I learn about these things, fine, right? There's things that we did in ignorance. There's things that our forefathers did, right? there's hymns that we sing because it's based off of what somebody told you. But what I'm trying to tell you is that we know where the name Jesus or Jesus comes from. And I'm here to tell you that I believe that there's power in his actual name as well. So sure, some of us might have used Jesus and things like that, but it doesn't mean that we're penalized for it. Some of us still might be every once in a while think Jesus or something, or might listen to a song and Jesus pops up. Like, it doesn't mean that you're being penalized for ignorance or something like that. Right? That's not there's no penalty to somebody who's learning. If somebody takes away who you are, there's no penalty for that. I'm not saying you're penalized. What I'm saying though is that when we learn the truth, now we should be greater, right? That hey, our ancestors did what they did. Our people taught us what they knew, right? They forgot a lot of things about themselves, if outright just were denied knowledge of themselves. Hey, but the Bible says greater things will you do. So, we can do greater, right? Some people weren't raised on the name Jesus at all, right? So, but it doesn't mean that they're better than you now. Once you know, now you can be held accountable for what you know and try out what's being said by what's being said, right? So try it out by the standard. So it's not a thing of trying to put guilt on somebody who at a time prayed in the name of Jesus. There was a time that I prayed in the name of Jesus. There was a time when I talk about my military experience and I talk about how they would ask me to pray over certain things once they realized my spiritual journey and they realized I was now on the ministerial staff, and they would ask me to pray, but they would tell me I couldn't pray in Jesus' name. That was a real big issue for me, right? Because that's who I believed in. Once I found out his name wasn't Jesus though, then it was an issue for me. I can't pray in the name of Yahshua. Like, so it's, so anyway, but I don't want that to be the focus. I want to talk about hypocrisy, right? But just so you got to understand the hypocrisy, it comes from lack of criteria. So here's some things. And once again, the book that we're using, I'm glad you asked, by Ken Boa and Larry Moody. I'm glad you asked, Ken Boa and Larry Moody. And got this from something that I had already put up on the chart. I believe it's like around the minute 45 section or 2 minute section on area on YouTube. So if you want to go back and look at it later on to take a screenshot of it, feel free to. Right, but there's a chart that I'm going to use, and this chart just is some really great questions, right? So this is something that happens all the time. So what about the hypocrites in the assembly, right? What is about the hypocrites, those who live underneath the criteria that we're supposed to live by, or that they say they should live by, and that they preach we should live by, and we find out later on they don't live by it? How should we deal with the hypocrites in the assemblies? Okay, and so this is a big issue. You see all this stuff that having a lack of criteria brings about. These questions that having a lack of criteria, it brings about, right? Having a not having the correct mindset, reading the Bible and seeing firmament instead of raquel or raquaya, or raquaya, right? Seeing God instead of Elohim, seeing Lord God instead of Yahweh Elohim, seeing Lord instead of Adon, or Lord if it's spelled or capitalized, right? Seeing Lord instead of Yahweh, right? Like there's no criteria. Seeing people that go to church and then live something completely different right before they went to church. Seeing people that'll go to the club and then are in the church, seeing people that are in the church, like seeing people on high. And I'm not trying to bring people down or whatever. I'm just trying to give real examples that people ask about, like seeing somebody like Bishop Noel Jones, who's talking about, who's supposed to be somebody who's about the word and is not married, but is messing around with this woman. Right. Like, seeing people like, what's the guy's name that used to be in Baltimore and now he's down in Georgia in Rebirth, where you had the other pastor that was doing hypocritical stuff. Like, this is real stuff that people are going on, right? So people ask, like, how do we deal with hypocrites in the assembly? And how do I deal with that? Like, if there's somebody doing hypocritical things, how am I still able to function? How am I still able to do things correct? You said you don't know, try all Father of angels, Lord means Baal, don't it? No. There's a couple times in the Bible where it says Lord and Baal, but they just put Lord there. So once again, we have to go back to translation. Lord is not always written as Baal. As a matter of fact, if it truly is, it should be lowercase if you're actually doing the technicalities. But if you look at Lord and you see stuff on there, Baal, you have to also represent culture, and you have to be honest about culture. So let's recognize that, for example, when Abraham gives a tithe to Melchizedek, and Melchizedek's Lord, he calls Baal, but Abraham still tied to him. Now you would say that sounds weird, but Baal to Melchizedek was Yahweh, which basically Baal just meant Lord. He was saying that Yahweh is Lord, right? But eventually, the people who were in Canaan began to worship the creation more than the creator. And so now you could have Baal that was water. You could have Baal that was a goat. You could have Baal that was a horse. So when that got manipulated, now you see later on in scripture, the Most High says that I can't stand Baal and can't stand that doctrine. Right. So we gotta be honest about it. And we see this happen because it was the 1990s or 1980s. They actually unearthed like hundreds of thousands of Baal or of Canaanite transcripts, and they started learning about Baal, and they found, yeah, Baal used to be Yahweh. Baal used to be the one. There weren't a bunch of Baals. There weren't this, there weren't that. Baal used to be the one Yahweh, and then all of a sudden, it changed over time to a bunch of different things, right? So that's what we have to be willing to go through, right? We have to be willing to talk about those things correctly, right? So when you have these hypocrites, right? And I'm not saying you, I'm just sorry, I'm transitioning back to what I was talking about. Forgive me if it came off that way, right? So if you're in a position where you're talking about hypocrisy, one of the things that happens is people say hypocrisy therefore invalidates what you're talking about. And some people's first response to that is, well, hypocrisy doesn't necessarily mean that just because there's a hypocrite, it doesn't mean that we're wrong. Because that if they're a hypocrite, it means they live underneath the criteria. Check the criteria and not the hypocrite, right? That would be even my own part of my own argument. How you doing, Sister Shima? So part of my own argument would be stop. If somebody's hypocritical, stop looking at the hypocrite and look at the criteria. A hypocrite just lives underneath the criteria. And by the way, since we're all human beings, at some point we will fall short. And if we all fall short, then at some point we will be hypocrites because we will live underneath the criteria, right? It will help you not to judge people's salvation so much, which you shouldn't be doing anyways, right? But nevertheless, but we can also be honest about it simultaneously and say that, you know what, when somebody's hypocritical, it hurts the product. It hurts the kingdom. It hurts the community, right? If somebody, this is why when people get paid millions of dollars, this happened with James Harden. I think it's the most recent example I can think about, but it happens somewhat often. They'll you get these people who get these huge shoe deals, and when they get these huge shoe deals, they're not supposed to wear other shoes outside of the company that they wear. So if you get I think James Harden had an Adidas deal, if I'm not mistaken, but he kept trying to wear Nikes everywhere, and he kept getting in trouble at the company because they're like, yo, we can't pay you hundreds of million or well whatever tens of millions of dollars, and you're gonna be wearing the other product. It makes us look bad because we're putting you out here saying that our product, like we put your name on our product and we want people to buy our product. But if people are looking at you and they're gonna go and get the Hardens, but then they say, well, wait a minute, Harden don't even wear this brand. He wears something else. It's a hypocritical, it's a living underneath, it's a hypocritical standard, right? And so we have to simultaneously do that to where, look, we should make sure that we have the mindset of the criteria, the word, the standard is what we're looking at. And if the person falls short, then we should realize that so it's like this: the standard is here, right? And I'm trying to do this where you can see me on both platforms that are visual platforms. If the standard is here, or I'm sorry, the standard is here and the person is here, right? So the standard is here, but the person is here. If the person falls short, what happens is we just fall off because we keep looking at the person. But don't focus on the person. Focus on the standard. The standard's still here. The standard didn't go anywhere. Just because the person fell off doesn't mean the standard fell off, right? Just because the standard fell off doesn't mean, right? Just because the standard fell off. I'm sorry, excuse me. Just because the person fell off doesn't mean the standard fell off. Focus on the standard. And a lot of times we focus on the person because the person's supposed to live up to the standard. So I get it. If the person falls off, it feels like the person's pulling on the standard. But even if they pull on it as they falling, at some point they can't hold on anymore. The standard's still in place. And we have to focus on the standard, right? But simultaneously, realize that most people are not thinking like that. Realize that most people go, this is why you're Republicans and Democrats, even if they want to change, they still can't change but so much, because if they go too far out, then people say, oh, all Republicans are this, all Democrats are this. So a lot of people are afraid to come outside of their standard. come out of the standard you're living in. And a lot of us are having issues with coming outside of or living inside of what our standard. We had a standard set by somebody else, and so now here comes truth, and truth is saying I got to eradicate all this foolishness. And because we're emotionally invested and tied in a standard that's not our own, right? So you can see how lack of criteria causes a lot of questions and issues to pop up, right? So we got to deal with hypocrisy and realize it's a real problem, and we got to deal with the sources and forms of hypocrisy. Thank you, Humble. We have to actually go through a process of trying to deal with the actual sources and forms of hypocrisy. We gotta call out hypocrisy in all its forms. And a lot of people get upset. Why would you talk about racism? It's hypocrisy. In your criteria, in your Bible, should you treat somebody a certain way just because of the color of their skin? If the answer is no, right? I'm not going into who is Israel, who they look like. We know who we are. I'm talking about, should you treat somebody as a terrible human being just because they have a different color than you? If you can find me that scripture, then that's the standard. If you can't find me the scripture, then anytime you do that, you are what? A hypocrite. You said, am I enjoying just having a conversation with myself? Well, I don't know. If you look at the people that are in the chat and the way that we've been answering questions and things like that, then I would guess the answer is no. Now, I'm a human being and I can't answer every single question that's on here. But if you would allow me in my humanity, or if there's a question that, if you're saying that because you actually asked a question that I didn't get to, feel free to put it in the Q&A box and I'll try to get to it as best as I can. But this isn't a true conversation because obviously you guys can't talk back as much, but just, I'll try to listen to stuff that's in the chat. That's why I said, thank you, Humble. That's why I say, thank you, Minister Tamara. That's why I say Deja and all these people who I know by their name, because we know each other outside of this. But people who are outsiders and stuff usually come in and they don't actually do those things. Sometimes we can have a standard of decorum and hopefully we can execute within that standard, right? So, well, I mean, okay, all right. So the sources and forms of hypocrisy: being double-minded, having cognitive dissonance, that's hypocrisy, right? Being double-minded, having that's a standard of hypocrisy. I have two conflicting beliefs, cognitive dissonance. That's hypocrisy. I say that I don't like monarchies. Stop talking about kings and queens and all this. But you live in a republic. That's hypocrisy. Why would we not call it out? It's a source of hypocrisy. Right? Amen. I'm doing well. Thank you, Lakyacha. Right? You've got to recognize that we're dealing with this hypocrisy. Once again, what is a hypocrite? A hypocrite is somebody who lives underneath the criteria, but we're once again in trouble because we don't even have a criteria. How you deal with a diaspora? What is your criteria for the diaspora? How you doing, Sister Helen? What is the criteria for the diaspora? Everybody talking about we got stuff to do and help and don't do all these things. What is the criteria for the diaspora? How can you know if you are hyper, you live above it, or hypo, you live underneath it, or if you're homo criteria, you are the same as the criteria? How do you talk about homosexuality and you don't even know that homo doesn't mean human being, or it doesn't mean male or female? It just means so if you talk about homosexual, then same sex, that has nothing to do with that. Actually, like the idea of having sex in that context, because sex is dealing with the noun. Now, if you're talking about as an action, well, then if you're a homosexual act, you can have a homosexual act without even being a homosexual. That's a really weird thing. We can't define it. So now you got to have LGBTQ, IAPB, C, all these different characters to come, all these different things that have to be put in there because we don't have a criteria. You don't even have a criteria for that because it's not based off of something that is lawful. Right? How you doing, Angel? Thanks for being part of the community. You're dealing with something that there's no natural law for. There's no universal law for. There's no kingdom law for. There's no marital law for. There's no law of equity. There's no common law. There's no law of attraction. Uh-oh. Right? Oh, well, this person, I'm attracted to this person or whatever. So are you saying that I'm the, what are these terms they use? I'm the top, I'm the bottom, I'm this, I'm that. I'm into the I'm sorry, somebody told me the other day I'm not supposed to say And well, I knew this already. Somebody gave me the term. I can't remember. Forgive me. I'm not supposed to say butch or dyke or something like that, right? I'm supposed to say I don't remember, whatever, right? But I'm supposed to be the more masculine one in the relationship. Okay, cool. So why are you dressing like a man if you're not attracted to a man? Now somebody get upset with me. I'm not down on you. I'm not clowning you. I'm not saying that you have no validity to any statement you made. I'm asking you a legit question, right? Because if you're not, why would you be attracted? Hey, I'm only attracted to women, but I want a woman to use a strap-on. Okay, a stud. Is that better? I don't know. I want you to use a strap-on. Well, time out. There's hypocrisy because if you're physically not attracted to it, then you don't need. Like, if anything, you would. I'm going into dangerous territory as far as being a preacher, right? We got to make sure we uphold a certain standard. But you would masturbate, right? Like if that's what it is, like, then what are we dealing with? We're dealing with something there's some hypocrisy. I'm not saying that we can't talk it up to her. Maybe you can get my mind to see the straight, like it's all one straight line. But right now you're pulling from a bunch of different places. And I'm talking about as somebody who's talked to people one-on-one about it. I'm not just randomly coming up with this. I'm talking about people who've told me their experience, not just told me their experience. They've actually asked for one-on-one coaching. People that I've known for years that were trying to get past it or whatever, for whatever reason. If you feel like you don't need to get past it, fine. That's another time for another topic for another discussion. I'm just telling you, like you got to be willing to talk about, like, why don't we call out hypocrisy? You should have self accountability. You should call out your own hypocrisy. If there's something that I used to teach that was wrong, I have to come out and apologize. You know what? I apologize. I got new information. I thought it was this. I wasn't born and raised in the Christian church. I wasn't even born this, but I basically was kind of raised up to be a Jehovah's Witness. I started going door to door at 4 years old. I started studying at about 4 or 5. My mother had me speaking in front of congregations at 6. I realized there wasn't truth at a certain age. I was agnostic for a long time. I ended up coming into Christianity. Then I actually met who the Most High was. I had a spiritual encounter and met him for myself. Then I went from that to realizing that kingdom thing seems to be more important than this church thing. Then I found that the church isn't even a biblical word. It's something that somebody threw in there. And then I started realizing that the criteria is off. And so self-accountability said I have to see what's hypocritical in my life. I can't sit up there and say that I support my people the way that I do. And forgive me. This you if you feel different, but I was in the military, right? And went and fought and was gung ho everything, and every president had to be right. And let's go in and let's do what we got to do, and let's go to the different countries. Let's go on the ships. Let's make sure that we represent this country with every 4 star and what they say. I had to learn what they said, all that stuff. And I had to learn the criteria. And then you go places and you go to Brazil and you make the wrong turn because you tried to go where everybody else is going. Praise yeah, I didn't, because they were going to all the whorehouses and strip clubs and the harems and all that stuff. So I'm thankful that I made the wrong turn. Make the wrong turn. No, guess what? I end up where Kakuta is. I end up where black folk are. I end up where people don't have real homes. They got tin foil and stuff that they put together and hope that a storm don't come through, living on massive hills and stuff. And I go through and I go to places and I spend hours there, and you start studying, you start researching, and you realize that, wait a minute, like there's some hypocritical stuff going on here. Because if I hadn't made the wrong turn, I wouldn't have learned about it, right? So now I've got to start realizing, am I going to stay in this hypocritical position, supporting something hypocritical that not only is hurting them, but also I got to realize, because I also learned about, through my father's CDs and stuff like that. Growing up, he had certain people that gave speeches, and so we had stuff about Malcolm X and stuff, and I had to go back and be like, huh, you know what, Malcolm was right about this and this and this, and I'm talking about another country, but what about my own country? And they're telling me I'm supposed to support, and support and defend the Constitution of the United States Corporation against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. When I go back home, I got more enemies domestic than it seems like I got out here. Who am I fighting against? When I go over to Afghanistan, and you got to make a choice as to whether you might have to shoot a little child, right? Why am I even in that position? Like, what causes me to think that that's a proper criteria, right? You got to realize you got to come to you come to yourself, the things that were put in you at a young age. And so when you start coming to the truth requires that you got to call out hypocrisy first within yourself. First within yourself. Okay, thank you, humble. Yeah, some of the stuff that we go to or whatever, right? And I'm trying to, because we also got a limited time, this rising, because we got to get ready for the Shabbat Shalom, episode of the podcast to come out today. You know, Except we've been led astray, slave culture. Don't even know what to call this new culture. Yeah, it's so you have to recognize that like part of this is coming back to who you are and being cultural, right? And recognize and say something's wrong with the criteria. So we got to call out sources and forms of hypocrisy. Now let's go into defining hypocrisy. How do you define hypocrisy? Right? How do you define hypocrisy? Well, we've defined it as living under a criteria. Hypocrite. Hypo, beneath, crite, criteria. Hypocrite is somebody who simply lives underneath the criteria. And you've got to know a criteria to live underneath it. Except foreign runs most of the United States, look at their cabinets, all dual class citizens. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, first of all, like the United States is not a country. I get that. The United States is 50 states put together, and it's not even a real country. It's a corporation. That's what you were talking about earlier, right? Was it with 28 USC 3300215A? So I recognize all that. We're not even dealing with a real country, right? But what I'm trying to get across to us, on a more higher level, or not higher level, a more superficial level, because that's what we really have time for today. A lot of people be thinking we're always going profound. A lot of times we're very superficial on these things. That's why we had the classes and stuff and the Bible studies and other things that we have outside the prayer and all that stuff, where we can get deeper into some of these things, because this is not really the platform, believe it or not, where we answer a lot, but we don't, in a sense. We're just trying to get out information to you to start having you have a culture every day that you can come into that's different than what you're going to see every day, right? So that's what we're really trying to do. But I get you. I'm with you, right? You said I like be spiritually in touch with Mother Nature in our universe. Okay, well, yeah, natural law, universal law. What is a universe? Uni, a verse, spoken sentence. So you got to figure out who spoke the sentence, to be in touch with universal law or the universe. And natural law is simply the nature of the universe. It follows the same laws that are universal. And those universal laws follow even marital laws. Things have to come together, even sex, even they say plants, male, female, right? So, yeah, we're with you, right? So we defined hypocrisy. Now let's look at some false assumptions that happen. So false assumptions that happen is profession does not mean possession. So here's some of the things that we have to talk about. And thanks for being part of the community. I don't know if it's pronounced Riri or not, but thanks for being on, right? So profession does not mean possession. I love that one. Profession does not mean possession. And for those of you who got the book, this is page 207. If you want to go through this thing that I'm going through today, right? So profession does not mean possession. That's a bar right there. You said, right? That's a bar right there. Possession. Profession does not mean possession. In other words, if somebody says, I profess that I know Yahshua, it does not mean that you have possession of who Yahshua is. If somebody says, I profess, a lot of people do this. I profess that I'm going to hem you up, bro. When I see you on the court, I got you. And I'm like, okay. I'm retired now. I don't really play no more. But I'm just saying, that people tell you, oh, yeah, I got you, bro. When I get you out there, man, I've been practicing. I've been working on this. My game is this, blah, blah. I'm be like, okay. We'll see when we get out there. Because just because you profess it, we're going to see if you possess them skills. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, oh, I'm going to come in there. I'm coming into the lane, right? And then I swat your shot all day, every day, right? You obviously don't possess what you professed. A lot of people profess criteria, but they don't possess criteria. Ooh, that's a bar. I'm telling you, bro. Like that. Like when I heard sis, bro. I'm sorry. I'm getting excited. How you doing, Miss Mac? How you doing, Sister Deborah? How you doing, NXH? Like when I first like heard that, like I was like, ooh, people profess a lot, but they don't possess a lot. People profess happiness. They possess money, but they profess happiness. But guess what? Just because you possess money doesn't mean that you possess happiness. Like people profess a lot, but they don't possess a lot. People profess that they know what's going on in politics. Then you start asking questions, they don't possess what they say they profess. People profess that they have these businesses. Then you start saying, well, how does your business run? And show me proof of where's your lifestyle at or whatever. And then they don't really possess what they profess. People profess that they know the Bible. We talked about this yesterday. People say, I've read the Bible. I've read the Bible 7 times. I've read the Bible 20 times. And it's like, okay, well, what's the first word of the Bible? And they say, in the beginning. Wrong. You profess something you don't possess, because the first word is ba'arashat, which would be in beginning, but it also means the son who comes out the right family, who is one with the source, is our head. It will be destroyed, being led to the cross. Like that's the first word. So you profess something, but you don't possess it. A lot of people profess what they don't possess. That's a bar right there, right? I wish we had more time today because we could tear that thing up. A lot of people profess what they don't possess, right? Second thing on there, right? As far as false assumption, second thing on there, it says progression, not perfection. Now, the goal is perfection, but comprehend that people are progressing. So we can't call everybody a hypocrite, right? Or we can't get mad if there are people who are still hypocritical, but they're trying their best. Put it on a shirt. Amen. Right. And I got to, I'm sorry. I just saw your text. I don't know why I missed it. I just saw your text about what you asked about as far as the pricing. We'll make sure that that's together. Right. My bad. I did put it out. Didn't put anything on there. You're absolutely right. So I'll make sure that we get the stuff updated, the pictures updated and stuff. Right. But profession, right, is profession is not, doesn't mean you possess it. Now watch this. Some people, we got to comprehend they're in progression, not perfection. And by the way, that is every single one of us. Every single one of us is not perfect yet, which means that we will have imperfect times. Every single one of us will have times that we cannot be perfect. So don't think that progression and perfection are the same thing. But we do that to people all the time. You don't believe what I believe. Why aren't you believing what I believe? Even if what you believe is perfect, why won't you give them an opportunity to get there? You're so wrong. I get this all the time. Why don't you believe this? Why don't you say this? Why don't you do this? You know this is this. Well, why are you attacking? Well, blah, blah. It's like, look, man, even if you believe that what I'm saying is wrong, but you feel like I'm on my way, then let me progress, bro. And let me progress this. And if you feel like I'm progressing, then give me some stuff to help me progress rather than just telling me that I'm not on your level. See, a lot of people do that. You're not in perfection yet, but I'm not in perfection. I'm in progression every day. I strive, right? I'm going towards the mark, the top of who, of what, the high calling of what I'm invited to. I've been invited to something greater, but if I've been invited to something greater, it means I have to come from lower to get to greater. If I'm going to go higher, I got to come from lower. And give me time, right? You talking about that you on floor 100. Now you won't admit that there's still 1,000 floors above your floor. Or I'm sorry, let's say there's 1,000 floors in the building. There's 900 floors you got to go, but because you're on floor 100 and I'm just coming in the building, you sitting there calling me on the phone talking about how long it's going to take you to get to my level. I'm already on floor 100. Help me progress. Matter of fact, if you really want to help me and bless me, wait for me to catch up. Now, I'm not saying you should put your life on hold, but hopefully you get the context, right? That just because I'm progressing, right, doesn't mean I'm in perfection. Progression and perfection are not always the same thing. Progression and perfection are not always the same thing. Progression and perfection are not always the same thing. And even sometimes people get upset with me because they assume I'm talking about them. Like, I'm not even looking in the comment section, but I can tell already because of things going on in the corner of my eye, like that people are getting upset thinking I'm talking about them. I ain't talking about nobody on here. I'm talking about progression is not perfection. You see what I'm saying? But we get into these things where it's like we're going at each other the whole time. Progression is not perfection. So there's some things I need to progress on too. There's some things I got to pull back from too and say, hey man, you know what? I might take a break. I need to progress some before I start doing, or I might need to perfect this thing before I can start progressing further. Like, right, but progression and perfection are not the same thing. Now I believe you should try to perfect as much as possible on the level you're on, so that when it's time for you to progress, you can be ready to go, right? But a lot of people try to make progression and perfection the same thing. All of us are trying to progress. So if somebody is a hypocrite, or somebody sins, or somebody falls short, or somebody does something and you thought that was going to be your leader, that was going to be the person that was going to make everything perfect, right? That's why we talked about earlier. Focus on the standard, focus on the standard, right? That you pledge allegiance to the standard, not to the person. So if the person is here on standard, but then they fall off, you won't fall with them because you're focused, right? We're going to try an exercise. I don't know if this is going to work through social media or not. If you were in person, it probably would work a lot better, but we're going to try an exercise for those of you who are on the podcast. I just need you, maybe you need to close your eyes and imagine this so you can see it in your head, right? But if you can, right? But imagine, right? So focus on my hand. I've got my hand up in front of my face, right? I want you to focus on my hand, right? I want you to focus on my hand. You see it? Okay, now I'm gonna put my other hand up, which is the person, but I want you to still focus on my hand. Somebody's gonna say that's impossible because wait, somebody else is there, right? But as long as this person is there, the standard and that person, they should become one. I want you to try and stay now. Watch. I want you to try and stay focused on this hand. Are you ready? I don't know if this is going to work on social media or not, but we're going to try it. Okay. I want you to try and stay focused on this hand. Here's the person, right? I want you to try. Can see most people are going to lose focus because they're going to start focusing on the hand that's rising. It's going to be difficult. You start seeing movement and you want to go to where the movement is, but don't focus on the movement, right? Right. Even if it seems like the person's going higher or lower, or they start vacillating because they're double-minded. They're all over the place, right? They're doing some of this, whatever they're doing, but focus on the standard. I don't know if that worked or not, but I'm trying to get you to see, focus on the standard. See, we're focusing on everything else, and we're not focused on the standard. The safest place of the storm is the eye. The standard, the storm can only function, right? Or not the storm, excuse me, the hurricane or the tornado. The safest place is the eye. The safest place is the eye. Yeah, unyielding criticism can make or break a community. Yeah, you got to get your place. So first thing about these false assumptions, profession does not mean possession. Second thing, progression is not perfection. The third thing, not all sin, watch this, not all sin is hypocrisy. Now somebody said, wait a minute, how you figure? Not all sin is hypocrisy. Why? Because somebody can fall short, right? And not even know what the criteria is. Okay, I get you. The safest place is 1,000 miles away. That's why the safest place inside of the tornado would be the eye. But yes, I get it. I would not want to be in a tornado, right? Okay. So right, but see, once again, not all sin is hypocrisy. If once again we don't have a standard criteria. What is the criteria? What is the criteria for your community? A lot of y'all don't even have that. You know that? Like you got neighbors and you and your neighbors have never discussed what is the criteria for you guys to get along. Some of you never even had a discussion. Then something happens and something happens with your neighbor and y'all get into it and you try and you like, man, my neighbor this, my neighbor that. If you had discussed with them, hey, look, I'm my neighbor, this and that. How do you work things? How do you run things? I want to make sure that I'm not a burden. I don't step on any toes. I don't want my children to step on any toes, this and that, whatever. But we have neighbors that we've never even set criteria with. Oh, thank you, Manifest. Appreciate it. Right? We have neighbors that we've never shared criteria with. If you have a neighbor that you live next to, you never share criteria with, I know you've gone to churches and sat down next to people and never set criteria with them. Salah. I know. If you can't talk to the person you live next to, how in the world are you talking to somebody you sit next to? Outside of just saying, outside of touching your neighbor and telling the neighbor, turn into your neighbor, blah blah blah. Turn the other one, neighbor, blah blah. Outside of that, what is your connection? What is your criteria? Okay, thank you. I appreciate you correcting me, rock dancers. Right, thank you. I think you know what the context is though, but I get you. Right. So at the end of the day, and see, even in that, like progression is not, perfection. But regardless, okay. So you gotta recognize that. Like we don't even do that, and we're so busy at trying to mess up every single thing. I'm not saying we shouldn't ask questions, of course, but we're so busy asking, trying to question every single thing, right? But we don't even question as far as our culture, as far as our neighborhood. Like, what is the context of my neighbor, right? Do I even know? Like, if my neighbor, do I know my neighbor has children? Do I know how many they have? Do I know that if I don't see my neighbor for a couple of days, it seems like the children are wilding out? Should I go check on some things? you know, you hear what I'm saying? We don't have a criteria at all. So of course we're hypocrites because you live underneath the criteria. But what if you don't even know what the criteria is? How do you know once again if you're hypo or hyper or you're living at the criteria? Here's another one that people don't like to talk about, that Yashua himself denounced hypocrisy. Why are you calling this out? Why are you talking about this? Yah's going to take care of it. Yashua is going to take care of it. God's in control. Take your hands off the wheel. All these things you hear, right? But Yashrai called out hypocrisy. Do you know Yashrai talked about racism? You said, is it possible to not sin? I mean, what do you mean? Is it possible to never sin? That's impossible while you're in this flesh. But once again, do you guys know that Yashua dealt with racism? But people will tell you you shouldn't deal with the hypocrisy of racism. But he dealt with racism. But then that's when we got to go into Jesus. Who you talking about? You talking about Jesus or Yashua? Yashua spoke on racism. Now, because he didn't use the word racism, people go, oh, well, he didn't speak on it. No, 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 no. Like, what is racism? Racism is a system of things based off of what? The competition, and the competition in that place would be based on what? It would be based on the people or the type of people that were. Now nowadays it's based on color, based off of chattel slavery, and based off of that black people could be in the sun longer and different things like that, and that black people had certain land and things like that. Whether you're talking about black natives of Australia, Africa, if you want to say copper colored people of the Americas, etc. But racism was something that was there too, because Israelites didn't like what they call dogs, half breeds, Samaritans. So a lot of stuff he's dealing with, he's actually dealing with that. And we don't want to talk about that. But when Yahshua speaks to the centurion, the guard, the person who has all this authority, and the guard comes to him, he has somebody who's a white representative, if you want to call it. He probably wouldn't even been white, but we like to use these terms. So let me go ahead. About a social construct, maybe you say he has white or Eurocentric values, and he's somebody who's over Israel. And yet the Bible tells us that the centurion guard was somebody that was faithful to an Israelite friend that he had and came on behalf of him. And so for Yashrai to hear the centurion and say, I have not seen such faith even in all of Israel, that is an extreme statement. I wish we had time to really go deep into that statement, but that is an extreme statement. Or the Samaritan woman who comes to the table and Yashua tests her. How does he test her? He tests her by testing her and saying the same thing that everybody else says to see what her reaction will be. She comes and she's coming on behalf of her daughter who needs to be healed. And she says, and she asked for the healing. And he says, look, it is not meet. It is not acceptable to do what? To give food or give this food, basically, or give this healing to the dogs. He called her what everybody else called her. They would have called her a half-breed. They would have said she was a dog. Even worse than calling her a bitch, you know what? He was calling her a half-breed. You ain't even really Israel. What you coming here for? You don't even worship the correct thing. That's what he's really saying more than anything else. So why should I give you what's for Israel and give it to you? And then right after that, guess what? Right after that, guess what he said? Or she says, well, even the dogs eat from the scraps of the master's table. And when she passes the test, right? He saw it in her already, right? Remember, he can read the heart. But when she passes the test, guess what he says? He says, woman, great is thy faith. And it says the same time he was talking to her, when she got back to her daughter, was the same time her daughter was healed. What about the fact that he's with the woman at the well? And the woman at the well, he tells his disciples to go away because he knows his disciples are going to be tripping when the Samaritan woman comes. He tells them to go. They go to get something to eat or whatever they're doing. She shows up at the well. He asks for her to give him something to drink. And she's a woman around a male, and Israelites beat the brakes off of female Samaritans. That's how much they hated them. You're talking about racism. And guess what happens? So they had a conversation. And first thing she says, what are you talking to me for? She confused. Why are you talking to me? Y'all don't talk to us. And then he says, if you would get past the race issue, if you would get past the social construct issue, he said, you would have asked me for water. If you knew who I was and you could get past what you see in the color, he said, if you knew who I was, you would have asked me for water and I would have gave you something that you would have never thirsted for again. That's what starts the whole thing with the woman at the well that leads her to go preach. It wasn't just because she was a woman, sure, her being a woman, but remember, as much as we talk about chauvinism or male chauvinism, because chauvinism is different than male chauvinism, but male chauvinism or misogyny, like that wasn't what that was talking about. It was talking about the fact that, yeah, like, if you knew who I was, I would give you something to drink. So there's that part of the equation, sure. But you would be dealing with racism. She says straight up. And then she even asked him, she says, well, you guys say, your race says we supposed to worship like this, and our race says we supposed to worship like this. Tell me. And he says, look, man, he says, he doesn't miss a beat. He tells her the truth. He says, look, we know what we worship because we are Israel. He said, however, though, there's coming a time where you're not going to have to worry about which mountain to face or if you got to go north, south, east, west, whatever. He says, because Yahshua is the spirit, and they that worship him have to worship him in spirit and in truth. He's dealing with racism. People don't want to talk about it though, but he's dealing with the issue. Don't forget that after he's gone up to be at the hand of the Father, not as far as gone for 3 days and then comes back, but after that, when he ascends up on high, that Peter is is having fun with Gentiles, right? And then all of a sudden, Hebrews come, and Peter gets up off the table and goes and sits down with them. Paul calls him out for it. Paul says, "What you doing, man? That's wrong." Like if they cool to be around, don't say that they're not cool around just because some other Israelites showed up. Like if they're all right and they're being about the word and they treating you with respect, why are you gonna do that? And then he has a dream in which he talks to Yashua, and Yashua says, "Why are you not helping out Gentiles? Why would you not help them if you know that they need help?" You see what I'm saying? Like it's a different mindset, but we don't even run and recognize that. But he called out hypocrisy on every level. But somebody would tell you and I, some like people will even say foolishness like, "Why do you speak about racism? You know, Dr. King, you should be more like Dr. King." Dr. King's legacy is built off of speaking on racism. You know what I'm saying? like people, there are people who've never I'm somebody who loves to listen to Dr. King's sermons, but there are people who've never actually listened to a Dr. King sermon. They just only know what he said about racism. You said I'm confusing the world. Well, how am I confusing the world? Because I don't agree with you? Because I haven't said one thing that's not contextually factual. But tell me, well, I guess you can't now. but but somebody comes on, see, people get emotional. You're confusing the world. How dare you say this? Blah blah. No, like it's not confusion. Look at what Yahshua does. And by the way, it's not black white. It's black black, if you will, because they look the same. These people I'm talking about, they would have looked the same. This would have been family, but they had social construct issues. They have what? Social construct issues. And we have a lot of what? Social construct issues. Right? We're not willing, right, to actually have real conversation. We have social construct issues. Right? And people don't want to be honest about that, but we have social construct issues. But Yahshua spoke on that. There's more we can go over. I've skipped over some, but we don't think about it. Right? What about remember when Yahshua says you got to put this stuff together, right? When Yahshua says, Holy Spirit help me. He's asked by somebody who, some versions say a lawyer, some versions say he was a Sanhedrin of the Sanhedrin, whatever, been one and the same. And somebody asked him about the criteria because he's been answering all the questions correct. They've been trying to trip him up, and he's been answering everything correctly. So they come to Yahshua and they say, okay, the guy listens. He says, "What is the most important commandment of all?" And so he quotes Deuteronomy 6:4. Hero, Yahshua, Yahweh Elohim, Yahweh Elohim Aleph. The Lord your God is one, and you must love him with all the lab, all the passion, all the heart, all the soul, all the psychology, all the mind, which is really the spirit, and all your strength. Right. He says that the first of all commandments. The second like it is this: to love your neighbor as you love yourself. On this hang all the other commandments. Now, a lot of us, if you don't know how to put those scriptures together, because you have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, so you could pull from these different scriptures to get a full context, because all of them are looking at it from a different angle, right? But if you put the full story together, what happens next is somebody says, "Well, who is my neighbor?" Because my neighbor might be somebody I don't want to help. So we would say, well, somebody would say, "Well, what does that do with racism, Kofi? I don't even see what you're doing, Kofi. Like, where you going with this?" You know what I'm saying? Like, where you going with this, bro? Like, I don't even see no race involved. This is when he says, after they say, "Who is my neighbor?" He talks about what you call the Good Samaritan, right? That Samaritan story, the half breed that I talked about, the people they call dogs. He says, "Look, there was a man that was beat up. And they robbed him. They messed him up. They left him for dead on the side of the road in the ditch." He says there was an Israelite brother who was clergy, He walked past, he saw him, and he acted like he didn't even exist. So he saw a man dead, basically could be dead or dying, and just kept on walking. Right? This is his Israelite brother. Just kept on walking straight. Second thing he does is what? Then he says there was another Israelite brother, and that brother was walking, and he said this one's more like a deacon, and that deacon saw him on the side of the road and jumped to the other side just so he wouldn't have to deal with him, and kept it moving. Right? Then, but then he says there was a Samaritan that came. Right. Then he said there was a Samaritan that came, the half breeds, the ones that they said weren't as good as them. He said the Samaritan saw him, made sure he picked him up, put him on his beast, took him to a place where he had already had money and he had credit. He took him in a room. He took care of his wounds, by the way, before he got there. Then tended to him overnight. Then it says he had to leave the next day. So in the rising, he gets up and he says, "Look, I got to go to my next destination." He says, "I'm on my way to my next destination." He said, "However, I need you to take care of this man for me." Right? He said, "I got credit with you, so just add it to my bill." Right? I already got credit with you. He said, "And if you go past what my credit is, then when I get back, I'm gonna go ahead and do what? Once I get back, I'm gonna pay you whatever I owe you. So however long he needs to recover and get his life back on track, that's what you do for this man." That's what he did. That's what he did. And then Yashua asked the question at the end. So which one, was like, so which one was his brother? And the guy, when he answers, because he doesn't like Samaritans, he doesn't even say it was the Samaritan. He just says it was the one who helped, basically. Like, because he can't even bring himself to say it was the Samaritan. But that's what he ends up basically saying, right? So he does all those, and then after that, he says, okay. He says, so now you need to go and you need to be the same way. And he said, now that you comprehend this, go your way, and you need to be the same way. Or if you go back to, I think it's Mark in it, because Luke, I'm coming out of mostly Luke now, but if you go back to Mark, I think in Mark 28 or 12, Mark 12, excuse me, around verse 34, he says, now you are not far from the kingdom. And verse 33, the guy actually answers, says, not only that, but you're right, because to love Elohim with all the heart, the soul, the mind, and the strength, and to love your neighbors, you love yourself, or what all the other commandments are upon. Because basically, Yahshua had taken Deuteronomy 6:4 and Exodus 20 and put them together, where he basically was putting the 10 commandments together with Deuteronomy 6:4. We don't know that because of context. We don't know that because of criteria, but that's what he did. The guy says, you're right, all the other commandments. So he didn't say the commandments don't matter. Yahshua didn't say, I only give you 2 commandments. He said, all of the other commandments hang on that. See, so we're dealing in hypocrisy even with that. But see, so, and no, I'm not a Christian, right? So we're dealing with the hypocrisy of that. Of course, people don't like what we have to say because we're hypocritical and we don't deal with hypocrisy. We don't deal with hypocrisy. And in Mark chapter 12, verse 34, Yahshua comes back and says, now you are not far from the kingdom. So if you get this principle, he said, you're not far. You're still not in the kingdom yet, he told him. He said, but now you're getting closer. He said, you ain't far from the kingdom, but he said, you're getting closer. You said you're a fan of more of Isaiah than, well, we just talked about that earlier. Jesus is not even his name or the same person. Jesus is dealing with Zeus, right? If it's got Pago Zeus, right? If you have Dia Zeus, if you have all these Zeuses, if you have Zeus, then Jesus, Jesus, Yisu, Jisu, or Jesus, that's somebody completely different, you know. But you said you're a fan of Isaiah more than Yashua. Yashua just likes to hang out with sinners and have and save murderers. Oh, okay. Well, if that's your thing, right? Isaiah is somebody that walked around buck naked trying to make sure he preached the word. So if you're going outside of context, and I mean, you can go outside of context with both of them. I think you should probably stay in context with both of them, right? But nevertheless, right? So you have to see these things. But even in all that being said, if we now, here's one of the reason why people are afraid to call it hypocrisy, and we got to get ready to take our leave soon, so our sisters can be ready to come on the podcast at 10 and lead us today. So hypocrisy does not invalidate Christianity, right? It does. But let's just say it like this. Hypocrisy does not invalidate the Bible, right? Really, hypocrisy, can I say it like this? Hypocrisy doesn't really invalidate anything because it's criteria. If somebody doesn't know the criteria and they live underneath it, does it make the criteria bad? If somebody knows that the criteria is righteous and eternal and they decide to do less than the criteria, does it mean that the criteria is still not righteous and eternal? We talked about that, right? The answer is really no. That's what you used to say when you were younger. Okay. So a lot of people do this thing where if we call out hypocrisy, we got to be careful because people are going to think that everything we stand for is bad. That's not real though, right? Um, if somebody gets fired because if somebody works at McDonald's and they bring somebody out their meal and they get upset at the person they bring their meal out to and they cuss them out and they get fired, does it mean that everybody that works for McDonald's cusses people out? No, you might feel like that. I don't know. I don't really do McDonald's anymore, but you might feel like that. But that's not the reality, though. Like if you go to Whole Foods and you go to a Whole Foods and all of the vegetables in that Whole Foods have flies over them and are rotten, does that mean that every Whole Foods you walk into that's the standard? Of course not. One person, one store, one thing can be out of place. It doesn't mean that what that place stands for or what that people do or what they sell, that everything is bad. That's a mistake that we make as well. So just because somebody's a hypocrite, let's not think that that everybody has to be a hypocrite. This is something that I suffer from a little bit. I have to be honest because I got to realize, yeah, if one person does something wrong, it makes us all look bad. But at the same time, I suffer from this a lot. You speak on the word, somebody goes, oh, so you're a Christian. No. Before Christianity existed, the word existed. Somebody says, oh, Joel Osteen did this, so you know how these preachers be. I'm like, do I look like I do what Joel Osteen does? You know what I'm saying? Like people just make assumptions about you, right? Because one person did something wrong. This preacher cheated on their spouse. So you know how all them preachers be. They be telling you one thing, but they be sleeping around with their wife. I mean, let's be careful, right? It's kind of like all black men are trash. No, you dealt with some trash. I ain't trash, bro. Right? I ain't trash, sis. Like you need to step up your game. Why are all your men trash? Right? All black women, they all can't do it. None of them like to submit, blah, blah. No, your woman don't like to submit. And by the way, you don't know how to submit to your woman because Ephesians 5:21 come before Ephesians 5:22. Before you tell your wife to submit to her own husband, right? Make sure that you comprehend you're supposed to submit to one another the same way you submit to the Most High, right? So just because you deal with hypocrites doesn't mean that I have to be a hypocrite. Here's another thing. It says the kingdom stands on the person of Yahshua, of the Messiah, of Mashiach, not the performance of those who are in the kingdom. Right? So you in the kingdom, once again, remember we said that profession does not mean possession. Also, we said the progression is not perfection. It's progression, not perfection. You ain't perfect yet. You ain't perfect. I know you think you are, but you ain't perfect. You are not perfect. And so since you are not perfect, stop acting like you can't progress. If you ain't perfect, then you can't progress. I'm sorry, if you are perfect, you can't progress. So right. And if you progressing, then it means you're not perfect yet. It's okay to not be perfect, right? So progress. Realize that you don't have it all together. That one, like we said, talking about forgiveness. I think it's part 2 of the FAQ. How do you ask for forgiveness? Right? How do you ask for forgiveness if you don't got nothing to forgive? If you can't sin, what you need forgiveness for, and if you don't need oh, thank you, Bounty, appreciate it. And if you don't need and if you don't need to be forgiven ever, then why would you try to forgive others? Somebody, when we were talking about forgiveness, this person came on and they were like, "Well, it's weakness to forgive." Well, then you sound like a weak individual because you sound like somebody that can't grow. If you ain't got nothing to progress in, and you perfect already, then what you doing here? Why are you selling my site? You should be up there. And last thing we're going to talk about, then we got to take our leave. We got to jump off because we got to get ready for our podcast. Those who want to be on the podcast, you can see it on the bio if you're on TikTok. If you're on YouTube or well, if you're on the podcast, you just come back on the 10th. If you're on YouTube, just simply go to the Kofi of 40 podcast. You got to have the Podbean app though, PODBEAN. If you're on TikTok, you can just look at our info. where it says bio rather, and look that up. Okay. The last thing, real quick, and then last thing says, don't let the sins of others keep you from Christ. That's low key a bar. I know it'll rhyme, but that's low key a bar right there, right? Like, don't allow the sins of others to keep you from Christ. Somebody did something hypocritical, so I'm gonna stop pressing towards the mark of the high calling. Somebody hurt me, so I'm not gonna keep moving. Somebody messed me over, so everybody's gonna mess me over. Somebody doesn't like me, so nobody will like me. Somebody messed up a marriage, so I'll never be marriage material again. Like, we go to these weird places, and you don't. That's not correct. Just because something happened to you doesn't mean that you can't go further. Just because something happened to you doesn't mean that you can't grow. Just because something happened to you doesn't mean that you can't be there for somebody else. Amen. Loose the cords of mistakes binding us as we release the stand of others. Amen. Thank you, Miko. Appreciate it. Right. Thank you, Manifest. So that's all I have for today. We're getting ready to jump into the podcast. My wife, the Honorable Maya, and her mother are going to be on. Please check them out at 10 a.m. if you can on the podcast. We're about to go there. Once again, if you're on TikTok, just go to our main page. Look where it says bio. You got the information right there. It might even be where it says website. Click on that for more information. By the way, once again, please, as a reminder, there's a bunch of people that filled out the forms for classes and did not put any name or number or email with it. So I could not put you down for any classes, or at least send you anything, or put you on our list, or send you the links for the classes. They're supposed to start next week, so you still got time. Even if you're not going to be able to be on the classes with us, know that we got recordings. If you catch up a couple weeks later or whatever, you can find out information on there. That's through, once again, our link tree as well. But we got to, if you don't have the link tree or whatever, if you're on another app, get in contact with us. We got our contact information in the description for the video and for the episode of the podcast, right? But go and look up. I know for a fact, my wife showed me, she told me, hey, go look, make sure that everything was fine with it. She's over our project management, ultimate. She's the head person, project management side of things. So I went and did exactly what she did, and it's excellent. Just simply go to the link tree. Look for, so if you're on TikTok, go where it says website on our page. Go where it says website. Click on where it says website. That's our link tree. Click on there from there where it says um, second semester 2022. Then read through the courses and stuff like that. And then if you are interested, fill out the form. Please, ma'am, please, sir. Even if you don't want to give your name, like, nobody else is going to be privy to your information outside of basically, for the most part, my wife and I, and possibly some people on the admin team, to be able to make sure that they get you things that you need. But outside of that, nobody's going to have your information. But if you don't want to give your name and your number, but at least give us your email, and then tell us, because some of you guys didn't put anything on there at all. And so I have no clue what you want to take or don't want to take. Just keeping 100. And therefore, I couldn't send you links. I couldn't do anything. So help us to help you. Help us to make sure that you're in position. We appreciate and honor everybody on here. Time is up. We only got about 20 minutes before it's time to get on the stuff. And I want to make sure that I've got everything set up for our sisters so that they can be ready to go. So we thank you. We appreciate you. We honor the king and queen in each and every one of you. Please check out my wife, once again, the Honorable Maya, Bloom and Flourish, not A-N-D, the letter N, Bloom and Flourish. You can find her on TikTok, YouTube, her website, and Pinterest. So please feel free to do that. Also, just keep checking your emails and stuff like that. We're putting more information out. We're being better about getting the stuff out to you. We appreciate you. We honor you. I'll be back on tomorrow, 8 a.m. Eastern New York time. I don't think we have anything else planned out for today. We were possibly looking at doing a weekly meeting. We're probably going to bring that back next week, which will be our third Saturday, which means that we'll be able to, just kind of have a hello moment and have some fun. I'm trying to look into some games that we can do to possibly have some fun and stuff like that together. So, we'll do like a little game day type thing on Shabbat next week. That'll be at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern New York time. And YLP 83 members, we're going to have some stuff to where we'll have some meetings, but we're also going to make sure you guys can actually see what's going on and updates. So we're going to have all that stuff together for you guys very soon. So you can be looking at progress and things like that, not only having to hear it, but you can actually look at it as well. So thank you. I honor you guys. We appreciate a king, queen in each and every one of you. And please study this word so that you can be hearers and doers simultaneously. As always, this has been Pastor Kofi, Pastor Servant of Christ, where we are always changing lives one mind at a time by being a voice of the voiceless and speaking the unspoken. And until the next chance I have to be before you, which prayerfully will be tomorrow at 8 a.m. Eastern, New York time, please remember as always, yesterday, that you are loved, you are necessary, you are majestic, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and you, which is all of us working together, will be the reason why people who are in this system no longer have to be of it. Shabbat Shalom, family. And hopefully we'll hear from you guys soon when my wife and her mother come on the podcast.